Welcome to part 2 of Efficient Workflow for Bodice Fitting. I'm going to share these pink zone adjustments in 2 videos because it was getting kind of long, so I broke it up in a part 1 and part 2, but I am going to release the PDF companion this week so you have all of the information. I will put QR codes to both videos so you can go back and refer to them. And I just want to run through those things for you just so you know what's in this PDF. It's 23 pages long. I started with how to prep your pattern pieces for a half bodice muslin. Then I continued on with an explanation about why it's better to wait to adjust the sleeve until the bodice is fitted. Then I show how to evaluate the fit of the muslin. And in part 1 of this series, we adjusted all of the blue zone areas. So this PDF includes information on how to fine-tune those adjustments if you didn't get them exactly right when you worked on your pattern before making your half muslin. Then we dive into the pink zone adjustments. This section includes all of the adjustments from the high bust down and the upper back down. And I've made them in an order that makes sense because remember, we're working from the top of the pattern piece down to the hem, so it's illustrated in a organized manner so you can just follow right along. So today what I want to do is share with you some of these pink zone adjustments, and there will be a QR code in the PDF that will bring you right back to this video if you'd like to watch along. We're going to start the pink zone adjustments with the depth of the armhole. I want you to think about the armhole as a hinge. Specifically, the base of the armhole needs to be close enough to your body so it acts like a hinge. If it's hanging down too low, it's going to restrict the range of motion that you have, and if it's too high, it can be uncomfortable and tight. So I'm going to show you how to both raise the armhole and lower the armhole. So if you need to raise the armhole, that means you're petitting it or making it smaller. So what you're going to want to do is create a horizontal line to make this adjustment, and you want to make it in an area on the bodice that's below the neckline if at all possible, and also in the straight part of the armhole. So here I'm working on the back of my bodice. I'll show you how to lengthen the armhole on the front. So I've drawn my guideline. Then what you need to do is figure out how much you're going to want to pick up or shorten that armhole. Let's say for this example, we want to shorten it a ½ inch. I'm going to mark a ½ inch up from my first horizontal line. Then all I have to do here is slash on the first line like this. Oops. Then I'm going to pick the lower section of the bodice up and align the cut edge with the second line I drew. Okay, and you want to make sure that your center back or center front is remaining straight. So sometimes it helps to have a ruler right here. That way you can make sure you're maintaining the absolute straight, center back edge as you line it up. I'm just going to tape that together. And in the back, it's really not likely that you'll need to true up the armhole because you can see that this adjustment is done straight through a perpendicular edge to the armhole. It's relatively straight there. So you can see I really don't have much of a truing up issue. So that's how you petite the armhole. Now you're going to want to keep track of all of these adjustments because in part 3, when I finish up this series with the last PDF companion, I'm going to show you how to adjust your sleeve. So you do want to keep track of all of these adjustments so you remember how you need to adjust the sleeve based on things you did to the armhole. So this is how you petite or shorten the armhole. Now let me show you how to lengthen the armhole. This would be a situation where you feel like the base of the armhole is like right up against your armpit or just too close in there and it's tight and it might be bunching up. You want to give yourself a little bit of length. Again, I'm going to make the same horizontal line, and I'm going to try to do it in the straight part of the armhole below the neckline. Okay, in this case, we have to cut it out first, so I'm going to just cut this apart. Then we have to add some paper to the lower edge. All right, so I'm just going to cut myself a little piece of paper here, and I'm going to just tape it on like this. So we're working with the lower section. Then what you want to do is measure up the amount that you want to lower the armhole. So let's again say that's a 1/2 inch. Oh, and by the way, it's very important for you to take a good look at what your armhole is doing, because you may need to lower it or raise it more in the front versus the back, or vice versa, depending on how the pattern is shaped compared to your figure. So just to drive that point home, let's do 3/4 of an inch here. So I'm just going to draw myself a line that's 3/4 of an inch. Then I want to make sure I put the top portion of the pattern back on. So I'm going to extend my center front seam straight up like this. And that'll give me a guide to position the top of the pattern back on. So here we're just going to position this back, and notice I'm lining up the center front of the top portion right with that line there. I'm just going to put a piece of tape there, and I'm going to put a piece of tape here. Now this is just a sample that I'm working on, so I'm not using big pieces of tape. When you're taping your pattern pieces together, tape it like you mean it. Literally cover the entire edge with tape so it doesn't fall apart over time. So you notice now I've added all of this, right? So this is going to actually make the armhole 3/4 of an inch longer. And you know what? I'm just going to write on there 3/4 inch armhole. So I know I dropped it 3/4, and then I can go back and look at that when I'm working on my sleeve. The other thing I'm going to have to do here is I'm just going to have to fill in the armhole right there, and then I'll stick a piece of tape over it. All right. So that's the first pink zone adjustment, adjusting the armhole to agree with your body. The next thing we are going to cover is the position of the dart. Now, the position of the dart and the ease in the dart are coming next. You may wonder why we're doing an ease adjustment while we're also working with the vertical position, because remember, we want to get everything into the vertical position first. We're doing the ease in terms of cup size for the bust after we get the bust dart into the proper position. The reason why we're doing that is because increasing or decreasing cup size also adds or takes away length. So that's why we're going to do a bust adjustment in addition to making sure the dart is in the right spot for your body. Now, following along with this, working from the top down, notice in the front, I dropped it 3/4 of an inch. That added 3/4 of an inch of a length here, which also dropped my dart 3/4 of an inch. So if I had moved my dart before I worked on my armhole, I would have had to do rework. So this is why I call this efficient workflow for bodice fitting. I'm just trying to do each adjustment once and not going around in circles. We've dropped the armhole, which also dropped the dart. What you're going to want to do to determine if you need to move the position of your dart, you're going to want to measure your bust position. And specifically, you want to find the apex, which is the widest part of your bust, and you're going to measure from your shoulder seam. Notice I have a nice snug fitting tee on that will allow me to feel for my shoulder seam in the middle of my shoulder, and then just measure down to my apex like this. So my measurement is 12.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the middle of my shoulder down 12.5 inches. Now I also want to add, for my G cup size, probably another 5/8 of an inch, because you don't want the tip of the dart to be even with your apex. You want it a little lower. So I am going to do 12.5 plus 5/8, which gives me 13 1/8. I'm just going to draw a line so you can see. So I'm basically measuring from the stitching line on the shoulder, okay, right here, not the edge of the pattern because we're not including the seam allowance, the stitching line down to, I'll do 13 1/8, puts me right here. So you can see on me, I need to lower that. Now, when I was fitting my half muslin to myself, I could also see that I needed to lower it. So if you would rather look at yourself in your muslin and just measure the difference between where the dart is versus where your apex is, you can do that as well. But this result really agrees with what I was finding on my half muslin when my dart was up higher than it should have been. That's where I want my tip of my dart to be. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a box around my dart. And the size of the box does not matter. This is just to isolate the bust dart. So you can see here, I drew right around it. Sorry about that little scribble there. I got a little crazy with my Sharpie marker. I'm going to measure how much I have to move it. So if I want to be here and the tip of the dart is currently right here, I'm just going to draw a horizontal line so you can see. So here's where my tip of the dart is. Here's where I want to move it, right? So I'm going to measure that. That is 3/4 of an inch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw myself a line below the box along the bottom edge of the box, 3/4 of an inch, like this. Okay. Then I'm going to cut out the box like this. All I have to do now is slide the whole dart down to that line. I'm literally just sliding it down and taping it in place. And what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with a 3/4 inch opening above the dart because I lowered it 3/4 of an inch. All right, so now my bust dart is in the right spot. You can see we have a couple things to do here. First, I need to fill in this hole. So I'm literally just going to put a piece of paper in here and tape that. And I'm going to tape this. Okay, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to continue my side seam like this. All right, and then notice I have a little truing up issue to do here. I'm just going to sneak this little scrap of paper that I have hanging off here, and I'm just going to put it over here like this. I just need a little bit of paper. And I'm sure you've heard me say in the past, we're going to split the difference here. I'm going to find the middle of what's happening here. You can see that this is the middle of my stitching line, right? I'm going to mark that. Then I'm going to measure out a 1/2 inch from that, like this. And you can see what's going to happen is I'm going to add a little bit below the adjustment and I'm going to trim a little bit off the top of the adjustment. So basically I'm just going to do this. And then I'm going to trim a little bit off over here. Okay. Once I've drawn that, I'm going to tape it down like this. All right, so now I've trued up my side seam there. Okay, and I've also lowered my dart. Now, if you have to raise your dart, you're going to do this exact thing in the opposite direction. You're going to slide your dart up and fill in the gap underneath it and then true things up. So that's how you get your dart in the correct position. It needs to be a little bit lower than your bust. And in the PDF guide, I do have, approximate measurements according to cup size. A and B, you want to be about a 1/2 inch. C and D, 5/8 or so, maybe to 3/4. And then if you're a D plus cup size, 3/4 to 1 inch. The amount that the bust dart needs to be away from your apex gets longer as your bust gets larger. I've moved my bust dart down. The next thing is, do I need more room? The way you're going to determine if you need more cup size or less cup size is to see what the bodice center front is doing right at apex level. If the pattern is not meeting you at center front, you need a bigger cup size. And if it's pulling past center front, you need to make it smaller. What you want to do first is stand in front of the mirror wearing your half muslin and just see where that center front edge is through your bust. The cool thing about a small bust adjustment versus a full bust adjustment is you use the same guidelines and you slash the same guidelines. For a small bust adjustment, you're going to overlap the pieces the amount you need to remove, and for a large bust adjustment, you're going to spread them for what you need. In this case, I'm going to show you a small bust adjustment because this dart is already huge, but I'll talk it through and you'll see what I mean. And I think to keep it clear, let's use a different color now. To do a bust adjustment, the first thing you're going to do is extend the top dart leg straight across the pattern like this, or however it needs. Well, wait a minute. Let's make it straight across. My dart's tipped a little bit. Let me just make it parallel to the horizontal guideline like that. Then I want to make a diagonal line from the notch in the front armhole down to the tip of the dart. Now I've got my guidelines. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across the pattern to separate it in half. Okay, now I get rid of this little piece of paper. Then I'm going to cut through the diagonal line to, but not through the armhole. So up to the armhole to create a hinge, right? And then I'll be able to make this adjustment. Let me just clean this up a little here. The first thing we're going to do is, let's say we needed to do a small bust adjustment, and let's say we just needed to get rid of a 1/4 inch. All right, so what we would do here is we would measure from where we slashed this diagonal guideline. I'm going to go in a 1/4 inch here and just make myself a little line like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing it in like this. So notice what I'm doing here. I'm swinging it in until it touches that guideline. If I were making a large bust adjustment or a full bust adjustment, I would add paper. I'm just going to show you. And I would mark a 1/4 inch away, and then I would swing it to there. So I'd be adding a 1/4. So you can see how this adjustment works in both directions, same slash lines. So you're either spreading or you're overlapping, depending on making it smaller or making it bigger. Let me just swing that in till the tip of that section is touching my guideline. Then I'm going to tape that in place. The next thing I want to do is, if I were doing a full bust adjustment, I would spread the pattern an equal amount. But I'm doing a small bust adjustment, so I'm actually going to draw myself a 1/4 inch line over here from center front to the tip of the dart like that. And then I'm going to just pick up the lower section and tape it back on like this. So you can see what I've done is I've gotten rid of a 1/4 inch of length. And I've also made my dart a 1/4 inch smaller because, let me show you, where this is overlapping right here, you can see that this area in here, under here, is overlapped. So now I've taken away a 1/4 inch. So we're going to redraw the dart at the base of the overlap. So let me just show you that. So see, this is overlapped right here. So that's no longer in the pattern. I'm going to reconnect my dart from here to the original tip to get rid of that quarter in the dart. Then I'm going to measure that. So let's just measure what that is. I don't think it changed so much on this. So let's say it's 6 1/4. Then I'm going to measure this one and make sure this is still 6 1/4. And it is, so we're okay there. Whoops, 6 1/4. All I have to do is true up my side seam above the dart. And again, I'm going to split the difference a little bit. I'll just put a little piece of tape here. And then I'm going to just find the middle of the adjustment. And I'm going to trim some off the bottom and add some to the top, like this. That completes my side seam. I just want to show you the full bust adjustment quickly, only because the dart legs change length when you do this adjustment. My pattern I was working with, the top of the dart was parallel to the horizontal balance lines. Here, it's not. So depending on how your dart is shaped, I'm going to cut straight through the dart like this. Okay, you can do it either way, but this way I'm going to be sure to include all of the added amount for a full bust adjustment inside the dart. Remember, we can't change the length of the side seam. Then I'm going to draw a diagonal line to the tip of the dart like this. And then I am going to cut this pattern in half like I did for the small bust adjustment. Then our first step is we're going to slash to but not through the armhole. I'm going to make a pivot like that so I can move it. And to spread, I'm going to take a little piece of paper. I'm going to stick it in there like this. And then I'm going to mark the amount that I want to add. So let's say it's a 1/2 inch, but let's do 1/4 because this is such a small pattern. So 1/4 inch that I'm adding there. I'm going to swing back the pattern piece so it meets that and tape it in place like that. Then I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to, let's just make it long enough so it goes all the way across. I'm just going to stick it right on here at the lower edge of the upper section. And then I'm going to add the same amount to the lower edge. Here's something else to consider. When you're looking at your half muslin, if the center front is picking up under your bust, you can use that amount that it's picking up to help you decide how big of a bust adjustment you need in the vertical direction. I'm just going to do the same 1/4 inch here. So I'm going to make a line and I'm going to continue my center front line down. And then I'm going to just tape that back into place. And you can see what's happening in here is I've split the dart and I've made the dart a 1/4 inch bigger because I went through the dart. Then when I redraw these dart legs, I want to go back to the original tip of the dart. So the tip of my dart was right here. So I'm going to just connect that right back and let's measure it when we do that. So I'm getting 2.5 inches there. So let's measure the lower dart leg. I'm only getting 2 inches. So I've got 2.5 here. So I need to make this 2.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make it 2.5 by extending it. And then I'm just going to ease this back into the original side seam like this. You can see that the dart is bigger. To finish this outer edge now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top dart leg, I'm going to fold it down to meet the bottom dart leg like this, and then I'm going to cut it out, and that's going to give me the shape. So see how now I have the perfect finished shape for my side seam for the dart intake. So that's how you do a full bust adjustment. In the PDF companion, there are QR codes to 2 different tutorials where I show how to do a small bust adjustment and a large bust adjustment. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, so I might have done it a little bit differently, but the result is the same. And one way might work better than the other way. So, I like to play with all different ways to do these adjustments, but that's how you're going to increase the cup size or decrease the cup size. If your pattern has a front waist dart in addition to a bust dart, you want to make sure that the tip of the waist dart is far enough away from the apex as well. So after you do the full bust adjustment, just double check and make sure that the tip of that waist dart is not too high or too low. The cool thing is it's very easy to adjust a waist dart to get it to be the right length. All you do is just measure up or down and redraw the dart legs. I do have a guide in the PDF explaining the different distances the waist dart should be from the apex vertically, and it ranges from 1/2 inch for A B cup sizes, 5/8 to 3/4 for C and D cups, and then 3/4 to 1 inch or more for D plus cup sizes. So I just want to show you really quickly here. All you would do is look and see where the top of the dart is, and if it's too close, you're going to lower it in this case. Just measure down so you can get that clearance. So let's pretend we want to put it right there. All you would do is just redraw or reconnect the new tip of the dart to the original base of the dart legs like this. And if you needed to make it longer, you would just measure up and do the same thing. Lengthening and shortening the waist darts is not complicated, but you do need to get them in the right position. At this point in the pink zone, we have dealt with the depth of the armhole, the position of the bust dart, the size of the bust cup by doing a small bust adjustment or a large bust adjustment, and adjusted the top of the waist dart to create a nice cup shape. Next week, we'll finish up the pink zone adjustments with adjusting the waistline, the hem, ease, and some body-specific adjustments you may need. You don't have to wait for the PDF companion though. I've included a link in the description below for you to have that. So if you want to get started, you can get started. I broke this video up into 2 sections because it was just getting really long. Remember, if you're enjoying my content, please like and subscribe. It really helps me grow. And thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.